Welcome to another episode of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group. I'm your host, Kelly Mould, and today we're going to explore the unique set of financial challenges and opportunities of being single in today's economy. Joining me today is Wealth Portfolio Analyst Claire Wordell and Chief Investment Officer Dominic Ceci, who both share their insights and experiences with us. Claire and Dominic, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Kelly.
So why don't we start by, it's going to sound a little bit basic, but I think it's important before we dive into the financial implications that we talk about what we mean by being single. So Dominic, I know you and I have talked about this, some of these financial challenges and exactly these segments. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think to get technical, I guess, we're really talking about anyone that's managing their finances on one income without a spouse or partner as kind of their financial co-pilot. So, everyone starts single.
Right.
There's some people stay single. There's paths to not being single and then back to single. There's a lot of different ways to kind of get there, but that's really the simple definition.
Right. And it's important, I think, that when we look at this, we're talking about one income. That's the key piece of this. And I harken back to my law days when we used to have to argue for married couples that the spouse that was at home actually had value. And even when you have a partner or two people in a home, that other person adds value and helps that financial situation, even if they're not bringing in the income. I think that's probably the important thing when we're thinking about being single. So let's now move on to Claire. Let's talk a little bit about being single. And we know that there are some obvious costs to being single, and then there are something we've been hearing is referred to as this hidden tax for singles. Can you share a little bit with me about some of the obvious things and then move into maybe some of these hidden expenses and costs that people don't readily think about?
Right. So one of the biggest things that Dominic already hit on is that you're relying on one income to cover a lot of different things, housing, utilities, everything like that. And especially in today's economy with inflation and the cost of all these different goods and services, it can be really difficult, or at least feel very difficult, to meet these expenses.
So Claire, I know we talk about housing and insurance and all of those things. So a married couple and a single person might be paying the same amount of rent, but when you think about the individual costs and the discretionary money that individual might not have because they're living alone, it's a huge difference. It's a material difference in their spending.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even take into account some of the more subtle things that a single person is going to deal with. And I know taxes come into play with that. Can you share some of that?
A single person tends to get a smaller deduction versus married people. And a single person has fewer credits and hits the phase out sooner.
Right, right. So again, we see some of those maybe less obvious changes to what their discretionary income is ultimately going to be.
Right.
I wouldn't overlook like some of the smaller things, right? Like there's this magic that comes when you're not single of bundling services, right?
Right.
and other things. Like cell phone plans is the easiest thing to look at. The more phones you have in a plan, the cheaper each per unit phone is. If you're single, like you are paying the highest possible price for that. If you have internet in your house, like it's one price no matter if there's 5 people using it or one person using it. So you kind of get some scale, when you have more people in the house. And then you can just add on, I talk to my single friends at work, like we shop at Costco all the time.
Right.
And like, I'm a nerd. I've done the math. We save a ton of money doing that because we can buy in bulk. And like when you're buying in bulk for 4 people, it goes pretty quick.
Right.
But, if it's just one person, it doesn't make sense to do that all the time.
Right.
So there's just things like that you can't take advantage of if it's just you.
Right. That's huge. There's family discounts, there's senior discounts.
Yeah.
I've never heard a single discount, right?
No.
Yeah, and it adds up, right?
Right.
And then you layer on top of that just the cost of housing to begin with, which generally singles struggle with more than couples do. And actually, I found some data from Redfin that was really interesting in this department, where roughly 70% of single people struggle with housing costs compared to about 50% of married.
Right.
That's a big difference. And so like you take that and then you layer on all these other things. I mean, it adds up.
Right. Well, and we're hearing about the challenges of finding a home, and let alone being able to afford those costs when you're married, let alone single.
Right.
We also know that people are staying single longer, right? So more people are facing these expenses. And the other part of this that we haven't mentioned yet, but I think is probably a big factor, and I'd like to hear what you both have to say on this, is the student loan issue with this. Singles are certainly, especially young professionals, are leaving their professional education with a lot more debt than ever before. So some people say they're starting out at zero, and I would argue it's even less than zero.
Right.
So what have you observed, Claire?
I think that's definitely a real challenge. And I think another part of this challenge is not even the numerical side, but also the psychological side too. Any sort of debt brings on a level of stress to individuals, and especially when it comes to these single people coming out of college with huge amounts of debt, it's huge. They feel like they can't get out of it. They don't know how they're ever going to get out of it. So just really creating a plan of these are the small steps we're going to take to kind of get you out of there over time.
That's a really great point, because they're coming out of college with more debt than, well, certainly, I thought it was overwhelming when I, graduated many, many years ago. But today it's much, much more difficult, much higher debt, much more difficult to start your life out with that amount of debt. And then I didn't have to face in that day what I think a lot of young people have to face today, and that is this environment of social media and all of the noise out there that says you should be having this, you should be able to move faster through this, and this is what life looks like post-college. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. The social media stuff, I think, is just bad. And the reason I would say that is, from my perspective, if you want to be really unhappy, just compare, right? Like, comparison is the fastest path to unhappiness that I think you can find.
Right.
And because of just the way social, it's like quick little bites. And so you can see things that aren't reality.
Right.
Right. I mean, people fake it on there all the time.
Right.
You get a picture of their like one happy moment. And then just because of the way our brains work, you go, well, this happy moment is their whole life. Like, their whole life is just magic and happy moments. It's not. It's not. Right? Like, they have all the same things. It leaves out
all the pain. It leaves out all the hard work. It leaves out all the time and disappointment that comes from getting from A to B to Z.
Exactly. And there's all the same insecurities and all the things, you know. And so, but like, you see that and then you go, well, they look happy. And so I need what they have so that I'm happy. And it's just not how it works. So like, if you can just think about it like nobody was watching, right? No one's paying attention at all. What would you want to do? What would you want to be? And like, compare yourself to that. That's a much better path than saying, here's all these people I'll never meet in my whole life. I don't even know if they're real people anymore with some of the AI stuff, right?
Right.
And so like, just put myself in my little vacuum, like, what am I really happy about? What would make me happy, and just compare to that rather than all these, miscellaneous people on the periphery.
Potentially fictitious fantasies of things.
And even just the cost to have the lifestyle that some of those people have is insane. And so the trouble there, especially, is with young people getting credit cards and taking on even more debt just to live that lifestyle, just to have the image of that lifestyle. And then that brings on even more stress and financial strain than if they were to begin with, okay, what's really important in my life? What are my values? And then how does that shape my goals?
Right. That's a really important point, because that short-term fix to feel like you fit in or you're getting what you need to really only creates this cycle of long-term stress if you haven't backed it up to take a look at what's really important to you. What do you want to have?
And like, look, anecdotal evidence, right?
Yes.
But I just can look at my own situation. I mean, I was single for a long time, right?
Okay.
when I finally got with my wife, right, who, eventually became my wife, I had like the worst car. I mean, like I still had roll down windows after that was not a thing anymore. I had hail damage. It was just a terrible car. I mean, it was great. I put 150,000 miles on. I got it dirt cheap, but like nobody was going to put that on Instagram, right? And I was living in a 1-bedroom. Like I slept on an air mattress. I couldn't afford a real bed. I mean, I was negative net worth, like all the things. But that's when I met my life partner, right? At that moment. I didn't have the shiny things or the shiny cars. And there's so many people that have stories like that, like that. And look, I mean, we've been married, we're going to be going on 14 years now. We got 2 kids. Like
You've
we're
made it
doing
past
well.
those hard, difficult times together. And that was.
And so like, it's just one story, but I think you can find a lot of people that are living well now that started from something closer to that than started in these fake worlds on the internet,
Yeah, I would argue most people probably start, because most of us aren't born with all the luxuries that come with more wealth, right? We're hoping to build that over time, but certainly even when I many years ago graduated, I had nothing. I was so happy that at the time, people would be happy to buy me a beer here and there or wherever I was going. I didn't have a lot of discretionary money. And even as a young professional trying to build that career, you're not starting at the top of the salary ranges. So, once my bills were all paid as a young person, there was nothing really left to be able to do a lot with. I was glad to be able to cover the bills. And I would suspect that's probably not that different today for people just starting out.
Right. Well, it's an interesting point. Like if you think about where you are now, there was probably a point in your life where you thought where you are now, or even some point before this was the dream. Like, man, if only I could be there. And now you're there, you might have even surpassed it. And yet so many people are still not happy with that. It's because of that comparison to these, external factors that have nothing to do with your life.
That's so funny you say that, because there was a point in my life where I thought, if I just had $40 to go to Target with and buy anything I want, I will have made it. I will be there. So I had more loftier goals as I went along, but for a very long time, was the dream. That was the dream. So was your experience similar to that, Claire, as you started out and tried to?
Right. Yeah, I would say so. So when I graduated from college, I graduated in the middle of COVID. So that in and of itself was also a very unique experience too. But I remember even before I graduated, having a talk with my dad and just figuring out, like, what does a budget look like? Because that budget is going to shape your ability to save and invest and build that wealth in the long term. So it was very simple. I used the same formula even today, now that I am married and a little further along in my career. So it's just figuring out, okay, what do I have dedicated to my needs? So rent, utilities, food, insurance, etc. And then how much do I have to my wants, or what I like to call fun money? So that's money you can spend guilt-free on whatever it is that you want. And then also making sure you take a portion to save for investing, even building up emergency savings, that kind of thing too.
That's really important. And that's a great transition. So it's, we've talked a lot about how hard it is today. People have debt. People are, struggling to move forward with their career. Housing is an issue. But there is a path forward, right? There's probably some things we can be doing to, as a young professional, to try to put this together and move forward financially. What would some of those key things be?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I already talked about it, budgeting.
Budget critical.
Especially with your post-tax dollars, so the dollars that hit your account when you're paid. That's really going to shape what your goals are and how you're going to allocate those dollars to what it is that you want to achieve. And then from there, even starting with creating an emergency fund, money that you set aside in case you lose your job or in case there's a really big expense that comes up, like cars. Love cars, but they're not always the most reliable.
Right.
So having that money set aside in case something does go wrong is huge. And even starting with even just 1 month's worth, building to 3, and then building to 6 months worth, and so on and so forth.
Right. I love that you emphasize that, because I think sometimes people kind of, especially when you're struggling, you're like, I can't even think about an emergency fund. Everything's an emergency right now.
Yeah.
But the reality is no matter how small you start, even if you start to move forward in that direction, we know you don't get through this life without there being an emergency sometime. So not being derailed by an unexpected emergency, by having at least something aside to help that, can be critical, can keep you on the path.
Right.
And I think emphasizing, even if it's the change in that middle section of the car that you're starting with, to throw it in there, that could be a tank of gas, that, really moving forward with that. And ultimately then trying to get 6 months. And the 6 months is a life changer, because that gets close to, now you can deal with a job change. You can deal with some of the bigger life things that are ultimately going to likely happen.
Yeah. And then just some other really easy things. When I think of finances, I think of keeping it as simple as possible. So even just thinking about the investing piece, if your company offers a 401k, 403b, something like that, and if they offer a match, take advantage of that free money and put in as much as you can to reach that match percentage. Even if you're not able to, just start with something to take advantage of that essentially free money that they're giving you.
So that would be where someone's going, look, I just got this job. I can't, I mean, I'm going to be lucky to keep eating and doing this. So how can I even think about 401k? But you're saying when there is a match, to do even the most minimal amount to get that matching amount allows you to actually make more money and not leave money on the table.
Right. Yeah. And especially if you are younger and starting out, compound interest is very powerful, even with small amounts. So just starting with something is better than nothing. Another tip is just when it comes to saving and investing or even paying bills, automate it as much as you can so you don't even think about it. If you don't see that money, you're not going to spend it. So that's something to also keep in mind. And then also when it comes to looking at your accounts and taking a full picture of the wealth that you do have, making sure you don't look at your accounts too often, especially during market downturns.
Yeah, that got me in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, because that might get you in trouble, right? And you might make decisions that you'll regret.
I made terrible decisions, but I didn't work here, so I didn't have the benefit of all this wisdom. But yes, it caused me to think, you get this, well, at least I did. I had this mindset that, oh my gosh, a bird in the hand is better. I mean, I'm watching the market go crazy. I need to do something, and I made some really poor financial decisions because I got too emotional and didn't think about asking people who know more than I did at the time about what would be the best thing to do. So we've talked a little bit about investing. We talked about 401ks, other things like, the traditional IRAs, the Roth IRAs. What about those options for individuals? Would you recommend them? How do they evaluate those options?
I would say, especially if you're a younger person starting out, taking advantage of the Roth IRA is the best, because once you put that money in, you won't get taxed on it further down the line. So I think especially starting out, that is an amazing option for investors.
And there's some magic to the Roth beyond that. And I don't want to get into the details because I'm not an expert on this, but because dollars go in after tax, you do have access to those dollars in an emergency if you needed them potentially.
Right.
Assuming some things without penalty. Now I think it's got to be in there for 5 years or something. I can't remember all the details.
Right.
Talk to your advisor. Right. But it's more flexible in that way.
Correct.
Than a 401k or something would be.
And you brought up in the beginning, there's a lot of ways people start single, but there's a lot of ways to end up single. And it probably warrants that even a young person that's going through a divorce, some of these same tactics can be helpful for that individual. There's some different dynamics there oftentimes in a divorce. You're dividing assets and trying to live the life you did as a married person. But the reality is that doesn't often work because all of this burden typically falls on one individual. And so you have to kind of figure out a way to navigate that. And the same, if you had to experience the unfortunate happening of losing a spouse, right? That's also another critical time for individuals. And if you are younger in that scenario, you may have even more critical things to think about, children or how to replace that income. So are there other strategies that you talk to young people about when we're thinking about how to move forward, where you might have a partner, but still preparing for that? If I have to be single, what kinds of things should I be thinking about?
I think there's just different social stuff that goes along with those, right?
Right.
I mean, and it depends. Some of those things you potentially can prepare for. I mean, maybe the first one that's coming to mind, and this is look, they're all tough situations, but
Mhm.
if you lost a spouse, probably unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had life insurance, then the financial part may have already been figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the point of a lot of life insurance, is for that exact scenario.
Right.
So you can, plan ahead. You hope to God it never happens.
Right. But there are ways.
But there is a way to plan ahead for that. I don't think there's divorce insurance. I don't know. Maybe.
No, there's not.
So that one's harder.
It's harder, but there are things people can do
Right.
and
Yeah.
say, okay, I'm going to keep certain money separate, anticipating that
And I guess
over time.
there's trusts and things. There's ways that
There are ways.
you could plan for that, I guess. But if you are in a position, you can. It's not going to make this the emotional situation or the social situation any easier, but the financial situation could be easier if you properly plan for that.
Right. When you think about things like term insurance and being younger, there are ways to mitigate, some of those worst case scenarios. And unfortunately, I've seen those scenarios come to pass, and those that had the preparation of some of the less expensive life insurance, in some cases, could be a real lifesaver to the family.
And even more simple when it comes to your investment and banking accounts, making sure you have your beneficiaries all set up and good to go. I know especially with bank accounts, just having it titled a certain way when it comes to the beneficiary makes a huge difference, because if it's not titled the right way, then even if you call and say, hey, my spouse passed away, this is now my money. If it's not titled in the right way, then you won't necessarily even get that money.
Right.
So-
Beneficiary designations are important for all of us. And I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes single people don't think about the estate planning as a critical piece to their financial planning overall, as what married or families do, where they're thinking about children. But it is still critical for individuals, especially those power of attorney documents for finance and for healthcare. Is that something you contemplated when you were before you were out of college or after college? Have you gone down that road about?
I think it's something that I've definitely thought about, especially as my financial situation has changed. I'd say starting out of college, I was more so focused on my beneficiaries and having my sister as my beneficiary. Starting out, and then obviously when I got married, that changed to now my spouse is my beneficiary. And we bought a house recently, so just thinking, okay, maybe I should start thinking of a will.
Right, long term.
Stuff like that, so that my finances don't have to go through probate, and that way the things that we want to happen will happen.
Right. One of the reasons I think that's so important for people at all stages, and I always start with the power of attorneys for healthcare and finances, because especially when you're single, you have to give some thought to who will make these decisions for me if I can't. If you're married, a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times people automatically go with their spouse. But if you're single, who do you trust with your healthcare decisions? Who do you think can handle your money and make the best decisions for you? And often those aren't even the same people. And I think those two documents are very easy to execute, and they don't take a lot of money. So if I had to talk to a single person about getting their planning in order, I would probably say, if you do nothing else, at least make sure you think about who you want your agents to be, and you facilitate this power of attorney as part of your estate planning.
Do you have any resources that people could go to create those documents?
Absolutely. In Wisconsin, if you go to your Wisconsin State Bar site or Wisconsin Circuit Court sites, there are options for those forms. The same, Department of Health and Human Services has some of those documents available for people. But oftentimes I will say, look, you can call an attorney. Oftentimes for simple estate planning, you can get it very affordably, and you have the benefit of having an attorney kind of talk through all of those, all the factors in those documents and really help you make some informed decisions to get those done. But they're so important. And the less people you have around you, the more important that is really to do that. Any other thoughts on things that young people can do, young professionals can do in particular to help make sure they're on the right footing as they move forward, hopefully out of debt and into building more wealth?
I would say something just to keep in mind is perspective. Yes, you may be starting out in a place that feels very overwhelming, but you have a long career and a long life ahead of you. So just keeping that perspective of where you are isn't where you're going to be for the rest of your life. With your debt, you will pay it off. You will build wealth. You will be able to live the life that you want, but it just takes some time and it takes a lot of patience because you will make mistakes and that's okay. You just have to learn to pick yourself back up and keep moving forward.
That is such an excellent point. You know, you have to give yourself some grace. We don't know what we don't know. I certainly made some terrible financial decisions in my past, but those have been so helpful as I've moved forward in my career and in my life to be able to help advise other people and to really recognize kind of how all this works together. Any other thoughts, Dominic?
My entire 20s was a terrible financial decision, right? Like, so I can relate. I mean, it's actually why I'm in this industry. But no, I think going back to what Claire said, you know, keep it simple. Doesn't need to be complicated. Just find some simple stuff that really works for you, and then going to the kind of mental aspect of it. Stop comparing yourself to others. Right? Just happiness is internal. You're not going to get it from that. So
right, and I like that you've stressed having a budget or some, you know, as you move forward, people call it a financial plan, but being able to put things down on paper and really outline your goals, the value systems that are important to you, and removing yourself from some of that comparison that we all know is just nothing good comes of it. It just doesn't. You have to know your own path. You have to face your own reality. I think that's really helpful as well. Thank you both for being here today. I'm hopeful that this is really helpful to some of our listeners. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. If you're not single yourself, we encourage you to send this episode to a loved one who is. If you have questions you'd like us to tackle, please go to the show notes, type your question, and hit submit. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group.
This podcast is not a recommendation to buy or sell any investment or financial products. Whether a particular investment or financial solution is right for you depends on the facts of your particular situation. Please consult your own professional advisors prior to taking any action based on the content of this podcast. Wealth management services are provided through Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth Incorporated, Johnson Financial Group companies. Additional information about Johnson Wealth Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, and its investment advisor representatives is available at advisorinfo.sec.gov. Investment products are not insured by FDIC, are not deposits, and may lose value.